Hi, I'm Althea. After my stroke, my son and his wife said they'd take care of me. 2 weeks later, I was standing in the cold with a plastic bag of pills and no house to go back to. They said, "You'll be back begging in a month." But what they didn't know was I'd already started gathering the proof. What would you do if your own child pushed you out of your life and smiled while doing it? Would you stay quiet, or would you fight for the truth? I was sitting at the edge of the guest bed, the plastic organizer of my daily pills resting on my lap. The overhead light had been off for a while, but a faint glow still leaked under the door, hallway lights flickering, casting long shadows on the carpet. Clark hadn't said goodnight. He hadn't said much at all since I came home from the hospital. I counted out my evening meds, hands trembling slightly, not from the stroke, but from the feeling that something unspoken had begun brewing in the walls of this house. The silence tonight was different. It had weight. I adjusted the pillow behind my back, waiting for something. A knock, 3 soft taps. Then the door opened. Vera. She didn't come in, just stood in the frame like she was inspecting a guest at a hotel she didn't remember inviting. "We need to talk," she said flatly. I nodded, slipping the pill case beside me. "Of course." She exhaled through her nose, as if just speaking to me cost her something. "It's been hard, for all of us. Juniper's not sleeping well, and frankly, the dynamic in the house has shifted. We think it might be best if you head back to your friend's place for a while." I blinked. Diane passed 2 years ago. That house isn't even hers anymore. She didn't flinch. "I'm sure you can work something out. Just not here. It's not sustainable." My fingers dug into the comforter. "I just had a stroke, Vera. We've all had to adjust." She shrugged like that was the end of it. Behind her, I saw Clark standing in the hallway, not speaking, not moving, just watching. I waited for him to say something. He didn't. "I don't have anywhere else to go." My voice was lower now, careful, controlled. Clark finally moved, toward the coat rack. He pulled down the tote bag I'd used when I first came to stay, set it gently by the door. The sound of the garage door opening echoed through the hall. I stood, slowly. Each step I took toward that door felt heavier than the last. Vera didn't move. Clark stepped aside. I turned at the threshold. "Is this really happening?" Vera smirked. "You'll be back, begging. They always do." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words lodged somewhere deep in my chest, heavier than anything the stroke had left behind. The cold hit me before I was all the way down the driveway. A sliver of moonlight reflected off the damp sidewalk. I stood there with my bag, half zipped, meds inside clinking softly as I shifted. I called for a rideshare, fingers numb as I tapped the screen. The wait time, 17 minutes. I didn't look back. That voice followed me anyway. "Begging in a month." The car pulled up. I nodded to the driver, slid in, and shut the door behind me. The heater was blowing, but I couldn't feel any of it. My mind replayed that sentence, looping like a cruel lullaby. "You'll be back, begging, always do." The car moved through the darkened neighborhood, one I'd helped Clark move into. I remembered hauling boxes, repainting walls, babysitting Juniper while Vera rested. I glanced at my phone. No charger, no ID, no backup cash. I'd left it all in that guest room, a room that was never mine. My breath hitched, not from panic. Not exactly. Just disbelief that this was where the story turned. They'd shut the garage door before I reached the sidewalk, like I was trash left out too long. A memory surged. Juniper's 5th birthday. I had stayed up all night baking her cake from scratch. Clark helped with the frosting, laughing when we spilled sprinkles. Vera hovered in the doorway, watching, not smiling, just measuring. That was the first time I saw the look. Cold calculation under a polite nod. Back then, I ignored it. Now, I couldn't afford to. The driver asked, "Ma'am, this the right drop-off?" I nodded. "Bus stop's fine." He hesitated. "It's late." I smiled politely. "I'm aware." The bench was cold, and the metal felt like ice through my coat. I pulled my scarf tight, huddled into the fabric. I could call someone, but I wouldn't. They think I'll beg. They don't know me at all. The wind had picked up by the time the rideshare dropped me off. I stood at the curb with my tote bag, staring at the small house on Birchwood Avenue, once Diane's, now managed by her niece, who had kindly agreed to let me stay for a few weeks. The porch light was on, casting a soft glow over the cracked steps and faded welcome mat. I still remembered when Diane and I painted that porch together, white that didn't stay white very long under Texas dust. Inside, the house smelled like thyme, old wood, cinnamon, and just a hint of something floral left in the fabric of the curtains. I walked through the narrow hallway, flicking on a lamp in the living room. Everything was still, quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't comfort, only echoed. I dropped my bag near the couch and sat down, rubbing my knees. I hadn't eaten since noon, but hunger wasn't the noise in my chest. It was something deeper. I pulled out my phone, tried to log into my bank app. It spun for a moment, then logged me out. I frowned, then tried again. This time, I was met with a message. Account information unavailable. Please contact your branch. I called the bank. After the usual hold music and security questions, the woman on the line spoke carefully. Ms. Krantz, I'm showing you're no longer listed as a co-owner on the mortgage account. What? It appears the ownership was updated last month. You may need to speak with the property title office for further clarification. My mouth went dry. I thanked her and hung up, heart beginning to thud in a way that felt more dangerous than any stroke symptom I'd had. The county clerk's office was closed for the night, but their records were public online. I opened the website, found the search bar, typed in my old address, and hit enter. There it was. Transferred title. New sole owners. Clark and Vera Laskin. Signed 2 days after my surgery. A date I remember only because I was in ICU, not even able to speak. I stared at the screen, numb. Not angry, not yet. It wasn't about needing space. It was about erasing me. I leaned back into the couch and closed my eyes. I could see Hank, my husband. The day we first signed that mortgage, he'd insisted on putting both our names on it. Just in case, he'd said. No surprises. He always made me feel like we built something together, brick by brick. Now it was like none of it ever happened. Vera had planned this. She waited until I was too weak to read, too drugged to ask questions. Clark? I didn't know. Maybe he just nodded, the way he always did when things got uncomfortable. I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled out an old notebook from my bag and began writing. Dates, names, conversations I could recall. Everything I still had, scribbled down with shaking fingers. If they wanted me invisible, they'd regret leaving paper trails. Later, while looking through the drawer near Diane's old reading chair, I found a yellowed envelope wedged between some forgotten crossword books. My name was written in her handwriting. For you, in case it ever gets too hard. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a USB stick and a folded note. Some truths don't stay buried, Althea. Use this when the silence gets too loud. I stared at the tiny drive resting in my palm. My heart beat louder than it had in days. Something inside me stirred. I woke up earlier than usual, the light in the living room cutting through the blinds in thin strips. Diane's house creaked as it always had, settling into the weight of the day. I shuffled into the kitchen, made instant coffee in the old kettle she left behind, and sat with it like I used to do back home. I didn't touch my toast. I opened my phone, only to check my email. That was the plan. But I made the mistake of scrolling through social media. The first post stopped me cold. There was Vera, smiling, angelic, her blonde hair pulled back just so, spooning soup into my mouth in a photo clearly taken weeks ago. The caption read, "Caring for those who raised us isn't always convenient, but it's always worth it. Family first, worship, grace in action." Below it, a sea of hearts and praise. You're amazing! What a blessing you are, Vera. She's lucky to have you. I wish my daughter-in-law was half as kind. I stared at the image. I remembered that day. I'd been too weak to even lift a spoon. Vera had brought a bowl in, set up her phone, took the picture, and then left the tray untouched beside my bed. She never fed me that day. She left me with the soup cooling, my mouth too dry to call for help. I had managed a few spoonfuls by myself later, hands shaking. But there she was, turned into a saint for strangers. I took a screenshot, then another. Scrolling further, I found a video. Vera in a pristine kitchen, our kitchen, tossing salad, plating meatloaf, talking to the camera. Sunday meal prep for Mom. She deserves the best, and I'll always do what I can. My name was tagged in the caption. My face not in the frame. That particular Sunday, I'd eaten dry toast alone. They'd gone out for brunch. I remembered sitting by the window that morning, watching their car pull out of the driveway while I pressed my palms into my lap, feeling too embarrassed to ask for help. I hadn't even been told they were leaving. Another screenshot. I opened a folder in my phone, titled it The Record, and began loading it. If they were building an image, I would build the truth. The comments made it worse. Women from church, moms from the school. God bless you. You're such a light in this dark world. I hope my kids treat me like this someday. They were clapping for my erasure. I sat in Diane's worn recliner and closed my eyes, forcing the fury down, like hot tea left too long on the stove. And then I remembered something. One night, back in their house, I'd been coming down the hallway, walking slower than usual. My balance hadn't fully returned. I'd paused by the living room, hearing Vera's voice, but not her usual clipped tone. She was rehearsing. Mom's doing better, but it's draining, you know. I do everything, but she's complicated. It's not her fault. Age changes people. But I try, because that's what family does. Silence. Then again, but with a different tone, brighter, more sympathetic. Caring for an aging parent is a full-time job. I never thought I'd have to do it so soon, but here we are. At the time, I had brushed it off, assumed she was on the phone. But now, it rang louder in my head. She hadn't been talking to anyone. She'd been practicing sympathy, practicing pity, and I had been the stage prop. I didn't scream, I didn't throw my phone or break the mug in my hand. I opened Diane's desk drawer and pulled out the same notebook I'd started the night before. I wrote the date, the time, the names of every person who had commented on those posts. Then, I flipped to a blank page and wrote in capital letters, The Record. If they wanted a story, I would give them one. Mine. I glanced toward the envelope again. The one Diane had left. I hadn't touched it since last night. My heart pounded as I picked it up again. Inside, tucked into the crease, was a small USB stick and a note written in her signature hand. This is for when they try to rewrite your life. I stared at it, my fingers gripping tighter around the plastic. They thought they'd erased my voice. But they didn't know. I kept evidence. It took me 3 tries to call the number I had memorized for years. Juniper's line, the same one I used to dial when I wanted to hear her laugh about school or complain about her dad making broccoli again. I knew the rhythm of it better than my own heartbeat. But this time, the call didn't even ring. Just a robotic voice that said the number was no longer in service. I tried again. Then I opened the FaceTime app, hit her name, waiting, connecting. Then it flashed red. Blocked. I sat there, phone still in my hand, staring at the faded floral wallpaper Diane never got around to replacing. It was the same room where Juniper once made me a crayon drawing of our family. Her, me, Clark, even Vera, with a halo over her head. She had glued on glitter, saying, "Because you're the sparkliest, Grandma." I opened the old voicemail file, one I'd saved a long time ago and hadn't dared listen to since the hospital. "Hi, Grandma. I made you a drawing. It's got a son and a dog, and you're reading me a story. Okay, bye. Love you." The sound of her voice felt like a warm knife, comfort and pain all at once. I sent Clark a message. Nothing elaborate, just a gentle, "Tell Juniper I miss her. I hope she's okay." No response. 3 days passed. Then 4. I wrote a letter the old-fashioned way. "Clark, I know things have been difficult. I know Vera and I never really found peace with each other. But I love my granddaughter, and I want to see her again. I'm not asking to move back in. I'm just asking for a seat at her life. Love, Mom." I mailed it, and every day after that, I checked Diane's old mailbox. The flag never moved. A week passed, then one more. On the 10th day, an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "We've discussed this. Vera and I think it's best to maintain distance for now." That was it. No greeting, no signature, just that one sentence, like a business memo sent to a vendor they no longer needed. I sat back in Diane's recliner, holding that page like it might burn me. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. But something shifted inside me. There was a time when I would have written back again, softer this time. I would have apologized for being sick, for needing help, for existing in someone else's house. Not anymore. I picked up my notebook, the one where I had written every name, every screenshot, every lie. On a fresh page, I wrote, "They chose distance. I'll choose truth." I didn't need an invitation back into their life, because I wasn't planning to knock. The next morning, I poured a weak cup of coffee and sat in Diane's sunlit kitchen, still in the clothes I'd worn yesterday. The letter from Clark replayed in my head like a scratched record. Cold, stiff, cowardly. My hands stayed busy, sorting through folders, old bills, anything I could still use to make sense of the mess they'd left behind. That's when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Althea? This is Maggie. Maggie Dowell. I used to live across from you." I sat up straighter. "Maggie, hi. It's been years. I saw that photo Vera posted. You looked uncomfortable. And I remembered something. My security cam caught the night when they put you out." Silence stretched between us. My mouth opened, but no sound came. "I thought maybe you'd want the footage. I can send it over." Within an hour, I had the video. I watched it on Diane's old laptop, replaying the moment again and again. There I was, toad in hand, stepping backward down the driveway, still wobbling from recovery. Vera at the garage door, her arms crossed, Clark standing behind her, with that same look he always wore when things got uncomfortable. Then the door shutting. No hug, no wave, no warmth. Just the steel clang of finality. The timestamp on the footage matched the night they claimed I chose to leave. The narrative she spun online didn't match the image frozen on screen. A woman discarded. I saved the clip to a USB, then another, then backed it up to the cloud. They had controlled the narrative for too long, but now I had something they couldn't spin. Later that afternoon, I decided to clean out my inbox. There were messages from pharmacy reminders, a few spam newsletters, and then an email thread I didn't recognize. It had been accidentally forwarded to me by Clark months ago. Subject, Grandma. From Vera Laskin to Nancy Barlow. We're bleeding money just because she won't go to assisted living. We never signed up for this. Clark won't say no to her, so I have to. And the worst part? She acts like we owe her something. I froze. The word bleeding crawled down my spine. In her eyes, I wasn't a mother or a grandmother. I was a financial liability. I printed the email, folded it, slid it into the same folder as the video. Then I pulled out Diane's notebook and added 2 new titles. Financial motive, recorded removal. I paused for a moment, pen resting against my lip, then began a new page. Timeline of lies. The date of my surgery. The title change. The Facebook post timeline. The email, the video. Everything lined up. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't being emotional. I was being erased on purpose. That night, I sat at the small desk Diane had used to write poetry. The same place where she'd once said, "Even when they forget your name, they can't erase your words." I wrote 3 things on a notepad. Call Saul. Collect documents. Own the truth. I stared at them until they burned into memory. I picked up my phone, hands steady now, dialed Clark's number. He didn't answer, of course, but his voicemail picked up. Clark, I'm not calling to fight. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I'm calling to tell you this. If anyone tries to rewrite my story again, I'll answer in the only language your wife understands. Documents, timelines, and evidence. You don't have to call me back. Just know the next move is mine. The library in Cedar Hill hadn't changed much. Same slow printers, same flickering bulbs above the computer stations, same quiet. I stepped inside with a bag full of folders, a laptop Diane had kept tucked in her closet, and one goal: put everything I had in order. I chose a corner cubicle, away from curious eyes, and logged in. It took a moment for the screen to warm up. I laid out my materials like someone setting up for a trial, because that's exactly what this was becoming. I created folders on a thumb drive. Housing fraud, medical neglect, public persona versus private behavior. Each one filled quickly. Screenshots of Facebook posts, my hospital admission records, the time-stamped video from Maggie, the email thread where Vera called me a bleed on their savings, the property deed with the forged signature. Every piece was now tagged, titled, and stored with redundant backups. I didn't just want truth. I wanted the kind of truth that came with timestamps. When I got back to the house, I finally opened the rest of Diane's envelope. Inside was a voice recorder. Old, simple, with one blinking light and a strip of masking tape on the back that read, "Play me." I didn't hesitate. I pressed the button. The audio crackled, then came Vera's voice, clear as glass. "She's a liability. I don't care if she gets sicker. The longer she stays, the harder it is to keep up the image. I've got branding to maintain, and she doesn't fit the picture." I froze. Then came another voice, her sister's, I think. "But Clark, he won't agree to that. You know he won't." Vera laughed. "He won't have to. He never says no, just lets things happen. I handle the hard stuff." Silence. Then the recording clicked off. I played it again. Then once more. I didn't cry. Not this time. I labeled the file, copied it onto the USB, and slid the recorder into a drawer beneath Diane's old stationery. I needed a second opinion, and I knew exactly who to call. Saul Delaney answered on the second ring. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Haven't heard from you since the school board election." "I need a favor," I said. Within 2 days, Saul drove up in his beige Lincoln, briefcase in hand, and jacket smelling like pipe smoke. We sat at Diane's kitchen table, papers spread between us. He looked over the property title and shook his head. "This signature? Not only is it inconsistent with your usual slant, but the date? That was 2 days after your stroke. You weren't capable of lifting a pen." I handed him the hospital discharge paperwork. "Exactly. I'll file a preliminary complaint. Doesn't mean we'll win, but it'll put a spotlight on them. And once we do that, we'll have leverage." I nodded. That's all I need. A light. After Saul left, I sat with my notebook again. For weeks I had been writing down what they did. But now, I started listing what I had done. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building something, and not just for me. For every woman like me who got rewritten out of her own life story. It wasn't about revenge. It was about record-keeping. If they ever tried to paint me as the confused mother, the burdensome elder, the ungrateful in-law, I'd have the paper trail ready, and they could explain it in court. That night, I sealed a certified envelope. No letter, no explanation. Just the USB, with all the files, and one small yellow post-it. "This is just the beginning. Mom." I dropped it at the post office before it closed. They thought I'd sit quiet, fade out, fade away. They forgot who raised Clark. The invitation came in a cream-colored envelope, hand-delivered to Diane's porch by someone I didn't recognize. No return address. No phone call ahead. Just a folded card with embossed script. Family Appreciation Dinner, hosted by Vera and Clark Laskin. Underneath, a date, time, and the phrase, celebrating the bonds that carry us. I read it twice. Then a third time. It was never about reconciliation. It was branding, another performance in their curated, smiling version of reality. I didn't RSVP. I simply showed up. That Friday evening, I stood outside their house, my house once, wearing a pressed navy dress and a scarf Diane had crocheted years ago. I took a slow breath before ringing the doorbell. The door opened to a tableau that belonged in a magazine. Candles glowing, music soft in the background, floral centerpieces with place cards tucked beside champagne flutes. I recognized faces, old church friends, Clark's coworkers, people who once smiled at me in grocery store aisles. Vera glided across the room like she was hosting a fundraiser. Her dress hugged just enough to be tasteful, her smile just wide enough to seem sincere. When she saw me, her lips tightened, just for a blink. Then she was back in character. "Althea," she said, air kissing the air beside my cheek. "So glad you came." I said nothing. Just returned her look with the same polite steel I'd worn to courtrooms and funerals. Clark approached a few minutes later. "Hey, Mom." His voice was hushed, hesitant. "Glad you made it." I nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." We all took our seats. Dinner was served like it was catered. Plated chicken breast with lemon glaze, seasonal vegetables arranged in stiff perfection. I noticed they'd placed me at the far end of the table, opposite the hosts, conveniently isolated. Then came the speech. Vera stood, glass in hand, blinking dramatically before beginning. "Tonight isn't just about food or tradition. It's about honoring the responsibility we carry to those who raised us. It hasn't always been easy, but love rarely is. Caring for family means sacrifice, and I'm proud of what we've built." Applause followed. Some stood. One woman even wiped a tear. I waited until the room fell quiet again. Then I stood. There was no clinking of glass, no smile. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small Bluetooth speaker, already synced to my phone. I tapped play. Vera's voice filled the dining room. "She's a liability. I don't care if she gets sicker. The longer she stays, the harder it is to keep up the image. I've got branding to maintain, and she doesn't fit the picture." Silence. Then Clark's wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the hardwood. Vera's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally stammered, That was edited." "No, it wasn't," I replied. I walked down the length of the table and placed a folder in front of her. Inside were printed transcripts, time-stamped, verified. "For clarity," I said. Guests looked at one another. One by one, they began to stand. Some left quietly. Others offered me brief nods as they passed. Nobody clapped this time. Vera sat down slowly. Her hands trembled, though she tried to hide it by adjusting the silverware. Clark didn't speak. His gaze was fixed on the centerpiece, like he was trying to disappear into it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply returned to my seat and picked up my fork. Dinner continued in stunned silence. Later that night, Maggie uploaded the video online, Vera's speech, followed by my evidence. No captions, no commentary, just raw truth. The comments began to roll in. I knew something felt off about her. My mother went through the same thing. "Thank you for speaking up." I didn't reply to any of them. I just closed the laptop and leaned back in Diane's old chair, letting the quiet return. They took my house, but I took back the story. By morning, the video had already made the rounds. Maggie had posted it to the neighborhood Facebook group with a caption that read simply, "Sometimes truth sounds different than what we're told." The comments rolled in faster than I could keep up. People I hadn't seen in years, neighbors, former colleagues, church ladies, sent messages. Some apologized. Some shared their own stories. A few admitted they'd believed Vera's version until now. It wasn't fame. It wasn't revenge. It was breath. I was finally breathing again. Later that day, I stopped by the pharmacy to refill my blood pressure medication. The clerk, a college-aged girl with a bored look, frowned at the screen. "I'm sorry, ma'am, your insurance has been terminated." I blinked. "Terminated?" She turned the screen around. "It says your policy was canceled due to relocation. Submitted paperwork says you moved to assisted care in March." That was the week I was still in the hospital. I walked out without the meds. Not because I didn't need them, but because I knew what I needed more: documentation. That night, I called Saul. "We have enough now," he said after hearing everything. "Video, forged deeds, false filings, medical neglect. They want war? We'll give them a courtroom." He helped me prepare the formal complaint. We listed every violation: title fraud, forged signatures, wrongful termination of medical benefits, elder exploitation. Saul printed everything and submitted it in person to the district attorney's office. And Vera? She was served the papers in broad daylight, right outside the boutique, where she'd hosted a women in business brunch just 2 weeks before. Someone filmed it. That went online too. Her face was all angles and silence when she saw the server. She didn't smile for the camera this time. I didn't watch the full video. I didn't need to. Instead, I spent that afternoon at a secondhand shop, browsing through a clutter of old furniture until I found a small writing desk. Nothing fancy. A few scuffs, a drawer that stuck when pulled too hard. But it was mine. I brought it home, cleaned it, and placed it near Diane's window. The same spot where she used to write poetry when the house was quiet. I opened a new notebook and started writing. Not out of anger, not anymore, but from a place that finally had space for clarity. I didn't write about Vera. I wrote about myself, my life before this story, the girl I used to be, the woman I became, the legacy I almost let them take. A few days later, a plain white envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a letter from the DA's office. No promises, just a confirmation. Case opened. You'll be notified. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I placed the letter beside Juniper's picture, still framed from her 6th birthday, still showing the gap in her front teeth, still reminding me of what I was fighting for. Not just justice, dignity, voice, legacy. They wanted the world to see me as weak. Now they'd see what strength actually looked like. The sun had just started to rise, spilling soft amber light through Diane's curtains. I stood in the kitchen, holding a mug of coffee I hadn't made. The scent wasn't real, just memory. Hank used to brew a pot every morning, whistling some off-key tune before work. That memory was warm, but it didn't sting like it used to. The house was still, not empty, still. I passed by the desk near the window, my truth desk as I'd begun calling it. The envelope from the DA's office lay on top, unopened for now. I'd read it once, enough to know the investigation was active. That was enough. I sat down and pulled open the drawer, digging out the small USB I'd kept tucked beneath layers of printed files. I plugged it in, not to gather more proof, but to listen. Just listen. The audio clicked on. "Hi, Grandma. I love you. Don't ever go away, okay? I miss you even when you're right here." Juniper's voice, small and bright, filled the room. The sound wrapped around me like a blanket. It wasn't just a recording. It was my anchor. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let myself feel it. Not grief, not anger, just love, as it once was. And in that moment, I realized that's what had kept me from turning bitter. That afternoon, while sorting mail, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Something told me it wasn't spam. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then, "Ba oi?" I froze. "Why did you leave me?" "Juniper." My throat tightened. I whispered, "I didn't, baby. I just couldn't stay where I wasn't seen." Static crackled. Then the line went dead. I didn't call back. I didn't panic. I just sat in the quiet, holding that tiny voice like a thread that hadn't fully snapped. News traveled fast. Word had spread about the dinner, the documents, the complaint. Vera's boutique had lost its biggest sponsor. A local charity removed her from their board. Her online posts became sparse, then stopped altogether. Clark sent me one email. No greeting, no signature. Just, "I hope one day you'll talk to me again." I didn't reply. I forwarded him the video link and typed 3 words. "Start from here." Then I deleted the message. I didn't need an apology. I needed acknowledgement. In the following weeks, I found something unexpected. Purpose. I started volunteering at a senior legal center once a week. Mostly I listened. Widows, retired nurses, quiet veterans, people with stories too often dismissed. Sometimes I shared my own. Not the headlines, not the scandal, just the parts that mattered. The feeling of being erased. The slow crawl back to presence. One morning, I spoke at a local support group. I remember the way the women leaned forward as I said, "Justice doesn't always fix the past, but it clears the path for what's next." I didn't rehearse that line. I meant it. Now, every morning, I sit at my little desk by the window. I write. Not for court, not for Facebook, not even for Juniper. Though I hope one day she reads it. I write to remember, to reclaim. Some stories don't need revenge. They just need to be believed. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that silence can be powerful, but only if you choose when to break it. There were moments I wanted to scream, to beg, to run. But I chose to gather my truth instead, to speak when it mattered, to document when no one believed me. Sometimes justice isn't loud, it's steady. It's the quiet strength to reclaim your place without becoming what they said you were. And for anyone out there who's felt erased, overlooked, or pushed aside, I see you. You matter. What about you? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Or had to fight for your truth when no one wanted to hear it? I'd love to know your thoughts. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. If this story moved you, type 1 in the comments. If it challenged you or made you feel uncomfortable, that's okay too. Tell me why. And hey, if you believe stories like this should be told, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. There's always another story, and it might just be yours.